Welcome back, my friends, to the show which never ends. With an anthropomorphic hen, come inside, come inside. Come join me and Viv, talk about creatures that live in the darkness of your id. Come inside, come inside. Come inside, believe me folks, it's great. Streaming on the last Wednesday at 8. Come inside and here as well, you know. We'll take you places you want to go. Come and see the show. The Comedy Rhino. Come and see the show. It's great, you know. They're behind that box is Ve Macrinnon in a box. There's Canadian Dave Scott. Come inside, come inside. Goodness, it's his nibs, the one and only in Squibbs. Exposing late months of fibs. Come inside, come inside. Come inside, the show's about to start. An insane mix of science, class and art. Come and see the show. It's good, you know. Come and see the show. The last Wednesday show.
Hurrah!
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody who is not covered by the list of ladies, gentlemen, and boys and girls. It's lovely to see you all. And first of all, I don't know why we have Donald Trump in the studio and not David Scott, but
Oh, here he comes. The door's opened and he's coming in the door. He's moving towards the back of Trump. He's coming to his chair.
and here's Steve, our guest. Hi, Steve.
Hurrah!
I still don't know where Dave is.
He's moving Trump out of the way, I think.
This is all getting very.
It's not Trump, it's Biden.
You're all American presidents. I can't tell the difference between any of them. Now, this is where we've lost 3/4 of our audience, and everybody's going to get totally offended. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start again as we finally got everybody here in the right place at the right time. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and on the last Wednesday of each month, me and the lovely Vivian are chair people of this circus, featuring our regular. What are you doing, David? Featuring our. All I can see is your left ear. Featuring our regular panel of Dave, Ian, and V, and delicious special guests. And our delicious special guest this week, and I've now found I can do something, so I brought him up to the top. Our delicious special guest this week is Steve from the International Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant in West Virginia. Because this week, by popular demand, I think that meant that V asked for it, in fact. We're talking about flying crypt. Yes, V?
No, I just laughed. Just carry on.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Enough of that laughing in the cheap seats. This is not a laughing matter, Mr. Macrinnon.
Right.
The popular demand, i.e. V, wanted us to talk about flying cryptids, and so we thought we could talk about the most famous flying cryptid of all, which is the Mothman at Point Pleasant in West Virginia. And we are talking about something that happened 58 years ago. It's amazing to think that it's 58 years ago, because I remember 1967. So, Steve, tell us about it, just briefly, just in case there are some people watching from, I don't know, a mud hut in the middle of the jungle somewhere who don't know what we're talking about. What is the West Virginia Mothman?
Well, first off, I don't know when the last time I was called delicious before, but I'm going to note the time and day. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. I guess I'll give you when I first heard about the Mothman, he didn't even have a proper name. I was in junior high school in Michigan at the time, and that was November 15th, 1966, when that first major sighting took place. A winged humanoid chased two couples down Route 62 out of what they call the TNT area. Now, it's been nicknamed the TNT area forever, but back, I can't remember the proper name of it, the Ordnance Works or something. Back in World War II, they made explosives. It was a huge complex. They made explosives for World War II and stored them in 100 of these concrete bunkers that locals called igloos. And it was pretty much by the 60s when Mothman showed up, it was pretty much dismantled. And it's the McClintock Wildlife Area now. People still call it the TNT area, and it's still very creepy even in the daytime. Well, in that November, this thing that these two couples saw, the Scarberries and the Mallets, they were two married couples. They were driving down a dirt road next to the old North Power Plant, which doesn't stand there anymore. And Linda Scarberry saw something in the road. She said, "What's that man doing in the middle of the road?" Well, that man spread his wings by about 10 feet and then kind of shuffled off toward the old North Power Plant, and they think it might have gone inside. And then they saw the red glowing eyes. They decided to leave, but this thing appeared to chase them all the way down south, down Route 62 into Point Pleasant. And they ended up going to the police station and telling their story. So this thing was, a lot of people saw this initially around that time period, November, December, and on through on the next year, 67. It was roughly humanoid, 6 to 7 foot tall, 10-foot wingspan, red glowing eyes. And if it made a sound at all, it was kind of like a squeaky fan belt, which I think is a bit disappointing. It should have been a big, loud, screech that would reverberate and create shock waves like Rodin, right? John Keel heard about this from Gray Barker. Gray Barker, of course, was the publisher of Fortean publications, a big deal in the paranormal community. He was the first one to investigate the Flatwoods monster back in September of 1952. And so Keel came down. He was there early December. He was in the DeWeese home, I believe, and they invited over several of the original witnesses, including the two couples that were chased in the car. They told their story. A young lady named Carpenter was there. Her first name just escaped me for a second here, but it'll come back. And she was driving by the old golf course, and she saw this thing standing there. This is in broad daylight. She could see the red glowing eyes. It took off straight like a helicopter without even flapping its wings, and then flew over her car. A little side note here. Roger Scarberry, the guy who was in the car. Now, all these people gave their story originally, but some of them just got quiet. I talked to Linda Scarberry several times before she passed. Roger Scarberry and the Mallets and Connie Carpenter, they were just quiet after that. The Mallets have never spoken up, but last year, Roger Scarberry came forward and talked to Jeff Walmsley. Now, Jeff is the man that has created the Mothman Museum and a couple other stores there in town. He was 5 and 6 years old when all this stuff went down. He was when the Mothman sighting started, and when the Silver Bridge collapsed, which was an important event that happened toward the end of all this. He was actually way up on 30th Street in his basement playing with his toys, and he actually heard the bridge collapse. Now, over the years, he created this great museum. And so last year, Roger Scarberry came to him. Jeff had been trying to get a hold of him for years. And he said, "Okay, you know what? I'm tired of hearing people tell my story and get it wrong." So he set up an interview for the next day. I was in on part of that, but it's going to be in Jeff's next book. So it's kind of under double secret probation right now. But what I can tell you is The day that Roger contacted Jeff, Jeff just said, "Roger, just tell me, did it really happen?" I mean, we all wondered if there was some exaggeration involved, or a little bit of artistic license or whatever. But Roger told him, he said, it scared the hell out of us. And the reason I mentioned Connie Carpenter, now she was an interesting case. When John Keel talked to her, she had conjunctivitis, which we normally associate with close encounters with UFOs or strange lights in the sky. But interesting that it would be caused by a cryptid and or a UFO. Anyway, she came forward recently, and Jeff has that interview also. I think he's hoping that the Stephen Mary Mallet will finally come forward, but he's already published 2 books: Mothman: The Facts Behind the Legend, and Mothman: Behind the Red Eyes. Very good books. There's interviews. He re-interviewed some of the people that John Keel talked about in the Mothman Prophecies. Got more detail, corrected some mistakes, and it just has it's a wealth of information. He's had this 3rd book on the burner for years. He has a lot of other material besides those 2 interviews. So this thing was seen at John Keel talked to a little over 100 people roughly between that December of '66 and December of '67. And he became convinced that they really were having some kind of an experience. And we can get into the sort of paradox that Mothman presents when people describe its behavior, whether it be a cryptid or some kind of apparition. But I'll take a breath and let you guys talk a minute.
One of the things that I've been intending to ask you ever since David said he was going to try and get you on the show is, in Britain, there's a well-known paranormal researcher who has been looking into a lot of John Keel's work and has come to the conclusion that quite a lot of what John Keel wrote was exaggerated or badly skewed. And I was wondering, especially as you're talking about having original witnesses coming forward, people who presumably haven't spoken to anyone since the John Keel days. Have you found any major discrepancies in what happened and what John Keel said happened?
Yeah, I really haven't. There were some errors in the book, and some of it, they cut out half his book. John Keel was always complaining about those faceless editors. Fortunately, a good portion of the stuff that was cut out was preserved in the sequel, The Eighth Tower. So there were mistakes made. He was skunked pretty well by a guy named Tom Montalone. Tom Montalone told a wild story of meeting someone that was sort of like an Indrid Cold type, which is another story. And Keel bought into it at first because this guy came up with, he admitted later it was just a college prank. He could see that Keel's eyes were glazing over, and he pulled stuff out of his, I won't say it, but he started talking about black cars and men in black. He hit on a few things that he should not have known, and it got Keel's attention at first. Later on, he thought Montalone should be discredited, but he screwed up when it was years after that the events that he put the book together, and he just made an error. I don't know why, of putting the Montalone stuff in the Mothman Prophecies. I don't think I don't find. I know there's been a lot of criticism of Keel, but others went in like there was Keel discovered that many of the witnesses would go home and they would have an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena afterwards, and which seems awfully odd if this is just some kind of a undocumented creature, right? But another researcher named Franzen followed Keel in 1 or 2 years later. They had corresponded for some time, and he gave Keel a lot of the information on the ghost flyers in Sweden. And he found even more, he found other witnesses that hadn't come forward, and many of them that also had an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena. Who was it? Dan Drazzer, one of his friends, he went in and found other witnesses, Mothman witnesses. So there were other people that sort of supported a lot of his research. He would write, he was very tongue-in-cheek. He would make a lot of jokes sometimes, and I guess if you took some of those literally, you might think he was up to something. But I just haven't found that. I think that, we all make mistakes. We're all fallible. But I think Keel was a century ahead of everybody. When back in the old days, for me, I guess it was the 60s for a lot of people. I was fascinated by Jim and Coral Lorenzen's books, from APRO. They had a lot of books on UFO landings, close encounters of the third kind, with seeing the entities, and the same with Frank Edwards, his great anthologies. I was firmly entrenched in the extraterrestrial idea. And I read John Keel's Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which has been retitled The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. And that's where he kind of presents the idea of window areas, trying to come to grips with why some of these things just sort of pop up, scare the hell out of people, leave a few footprints, and then disappear. And also the incredible variety of UFOs. I mean, you get the general categories of shapes like spherical, oval, cigar, or whatever. But when you get down to the detail, nothing's the same. So he kind of pulled me along in that a little bit. And but then when Operation Trojan Horse came out, I'd heard about it, and I wouldn't read it for a couple of years because I knew it was just going to completely destroy my paradigm. So finally, I manned up. I read Operation Trojan Horse, where Keel pulls in psychic phenomena, cryptids, UFOs, makes a great case, and he uncovers all kinds of bizarre encounters and experiences that kind of put a damper on, not completely rule out, but put a bit of a damper on the extraterrestrial hypothesis. So that book, Trojan Horse, and then, of course, I had to go into therapy for a while after that. And then I read, after I recovered, I read Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia, where he connects various traditions of folklore to some modern day UFO experiences. And so that with those two books, it put me on a completely different course. I have, I know that there's another thing. Keel, when Jeff Wansley interviewed Merle Partridge, now he's the one that actually had some kind of a bizarre encounter before the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant. He's the one that lost his dog Bandit. He saw some rotating lights or whatever on the property. In the Mothman prophecies, it says that they're eyes, but Partridge, when Jeff Wansley interviewed him, said that no, they were spinning lights. Well, so I wondered, did Keel do that, or there's a couple things in the book where I think it's possible that the editors had a little fun making things a little more uniform, because John Keel did write an article early on before the Mothman prophecies about Partridge, and it was more accurate with the talking about the sort of electronic lights and not saying they were eyes. And let me give you another one. One of the reasons that Keel was so down on editors. I don't know if any of you guys have read Jadoo, and that's his first book. It was fascinating, and there's great talks you can find online where he talks about his experience in the military, where he was responsible for the entertainment side. So he did sort of a Orson Welles program where the Frankenstein monster has come back to the Frankenstein castle. And it was in part of the script, I guess he's tearing apart the radio guys and the people in the valley. Some of them bought it, so they locked their doors and windows. They even set a bunch of MPs up to make sure nobody was torn apart from the monster. He was just when you follow his script. And then he left. He went to Egypt, Tibet, and had great adventures. Well, when he was in Tibet, if you read the book, it says that he saw the Yeti. Well, he revealed in an interview in 2003 at the Mothman Festival, and also in one of the Fort Fest lectures in New York, he said, well, let me tell you what really happened. Now, he was on the trail. He felt of the Yeti. He actually heard the call a couple times, and some of the locals were kind of pointing along the way saying, it went this way. But he said when push came to shove, when I got there, whatever this animal was behind the brush. And he said, it could have been a bear. I really didn't know. And that's what his original manuscript showed. But whoever it was, the editor or publisher said, oh, no, the abominable snowman is big these days. It's a Yeti. So they changed his script to calling it a Yeti. So there are many, and he also complained, a couple of my friends met him at the Mothman Festival in 2003. I wish I had been there when they unveiled the majestic Mothman statue, which stands right next to the Mothman Museum. And they found out all kinds of things about him. He used to write ad libs for a guy named Merv Griffin, who you may not know was a morning talk show guy years ago. He wrote some of the scripts for Lost in Space under a different name. And I definitely would have written under a different name. But he was just amazing. I'm not sure where he was going to be headed with that, but I just have great respect for Keel. The way he pulled so many things together, and Jadu. Yeah, it was it's a fascinating book. He talks about where he saw his second UFO over the Great Pyramid. The first one he saw was about 7 years old. He was in his, it probably would have been about 1937. He was in his parents' car and he saw this thing. When he was in Perry, New York, his mom had remarried. He's upstairs in upstate New York, freezing his tail off. And he starts hearing a rapping on the wall. And, he found out it was some kind of a poltergeist. And I think I would have hit the next county. But what he did, he went to the library to read everything about, psychic phenomena and poltergeist and so forth. This is during the war. And he figured out a code where he could ask whatever this was questions. Now, there's no record of what the questions were, the answers, but eventually it kind of faded away. So he was just a fascinating character. And he put his stuff in a box, cardboard box, had a couple of bucks, hitchhiked 400 miles to Greenwich Village, got a great job. Eventually, after he set his starvation period, he wrote romance stories for comic books. He wrote for tabloids. He was starting to make some money, and then he got drafted. The Korean War conflict, and they sent him to Frankfurt, and that's where he got the job as an entertainment director for Armed Forces Radio.
God, what a story!
Yeah, he's absolutely fascinating. And if you can find some of those lectures, it's not all in Jadu. If you can find some of those lectures online, it's just hilarious about how he's in this troop carrier, this huge ship with he said, we stood in line for breakfast. And then when we were done with breakfast, we had to stand in line for lunch. There's so many people. They kept telling him how horrible things were over in Europe. The trains are running late and all that. And you're going to be living in a tent city. And so they got there. And he's with a buddy named George, who had some journalist experience. He even had a little bit of television experience because a local Macy's had a kind of a beginnings of a TV station in their basement. So they get there. This limo pulls up with a German in full uniform, and he calls out Keel and this guy's name. And so they get in this limo, and everybody's wondering, why are these guys getting such special treatment? So Keel asked the driver, he says, are we going to be living in a tent city? He says, no, Herr Keel, you're going to be living in a castle, one of the castles that the U.S. had commandeered after the war, and that's where they set up their entertainment and news division. So it's just he was when he was a kid in Perry, he read everything in the library. He taught himself various sciences. He ended up writing a humorous column as a kid for the Perry newspaper. He got a couple bucks a week, and he's just and then when you read his Trojan horse and his various articles, many of his articles are that were published in various magazines from the mostly 60s, 70s, 80s, have been chronicled in anthologies. One thing I would like to recommend: the publisher that does these puts in some editorial comments sometimes that I think are, can I say, batshit crazy on the line here.
Yeah, of course you can.
So I would just be, you make your own decision, but I think some of the editorial comments are just way off base. But just, anything like, Colin Wilson, the great British paranormal researcher and writer who unfortunately we lost, in Alien Dawn, which is a great book I recommend. He wrote that John Keel is incapable of writing a dull sentence, and he's right.
Yeah, I knew Colin. He was one of the good guys.
He was a good guy. He got Ted Holliday's third book published after his death, and made sure the royalties went to his mother. I believe that's what happened. And he also was a big champion of T.C. Lethbridge, the dowser that came up with this incredible system of dowsing and gaining material from a dowsing rod. I mean, from a pendulum, rather. So yeah, he's written some just fascinating books.
I know that V. Can you hear us, V?
I can.
Yes.
Can you hear
I
me?
know you had some UFO questions, I believe.
Yeah, I was just interested in hearing about anything that links the Mothman to UAPs, UFOs, alien-related stuff. Anything that's kind of anomalous, really, that was associated with it, because I think a lot of media coverage of this sort of thing, it concentrates on the horror film sort of elements, that you've got this big dark figure with big red eyes and it menaces people, and that's what they seem to, and it can fly by taking off without flapping its wings. That's what they concentrate on. But I've read little snippets and heard quite a few people in the periphery of all this business talking about other weird stuff that was going on. And it seems like in some of the most famous so-called paranormal cases, there's all sorts of weirdness going on.
Yes, at Point Pleasant, the Ohio Valley, and not just that. There's a lot of weird stuff going on Long Island, where Keel was from. I suspect this stuff just goes on all the time, and you just don't hear about it all. But they brought up, I've made a few notes here. The Mothman, whatever it was, a few times it was seen in conjunction with some strange lights or whatever. There were two women, I can't remember the date, but in the Point Pleasant area, they saw the whatever it was, light or craft, and the Mothman in conjunction. A friend of mine, Linda Sigmund, saw a strange light along with the Mothman. She was 16 when she was 16 in April of 1967. She saw she was about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant. She and her boyfriend were just sitting on the hood of the car watching the stars, and they saw I'm really condensing this. She has a small book that chronicles all this, but she saw a strange light, and they both saw this light, and it I can't remember the exact description, but it went away. I think he got a little unnerved and decided they should take off, but they saw another light. And she didn't want to take off. She wanted to stay and see it. So she's leaning outside the window of the car as he's driving away, and she sees this Mothman-like figure flying right next to it. So I don't know that if it was a craft or who knows what it was or how it links it. So there are a few sightings where the Mothman creature or whatever it was seen with it. I should point out that there were a lot of, it wasn't just the poltergeist phenomena and the way it reacted, going straight up like a helicopter. It did flap its wings sometimes. So, and some people thought that a 10-foot wingspan wouldn't have been enough for a biological creature to exist. But it also, there was Small Town Monsters does a great has done a great series of documentaries, and they did Mothman, the Mothman of Point Pleasant, and the Mothman Legacy. And I'll mention quickly in the Mothman Legacy, if you watch it long enough, you may see my handsome countenance in there, so don't be alarmed, okay? But
See, boys and girls, I told you he was delicious.
and I'm actually in the first one too, but it's only about 2 or 3 seconds, and it's the back of my head. So, but you could tell I was going to be a star. But anyway, in the first one, a Reverend Gray is interviewed. He and his wife, now Pat Gray, wrote a book called The Thing, and they when this had, all this stuff had started, but they hadn't even seen the newspapers yet, so they didn't know anything about the Mothman was called the Bird early on. So they were in their bedroom, and this thing manifested, they said, and Reverend Gray's right on this documentary, sounds extremely credible. This thing manifested about 6-7 foot tall, classic Mothman, red eyes, right in their bedroom, and it faded away. And so the next day, they were due to leave to a far off country. They were Christian missionaries. And so they were back a few years later, and they saw the old newspapers, and they thought, my God, that's what we saw in our bedroom. And also now Linda, she and her boyfriend had missing time. I think they had several hours gone. And then there was another case where John Keel talks about a gentleman, doesn't name him, but in the Mothman Prophecy, he was a town official. He heard something outside, goes out on his porch, stands there, and he sees Mothman or whatever it was standing on this front lawn, and he loses 10 or 20 minutes. He goes into kind of a trance, more missing time. So, who knows what that means? I mean, Mothman seemed to spend a lot of time chasing cars. Some people think he was a harbinger, because the Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15th, 1967, losing 46 lives. And I've always said, look, if you're going to be a harbinger, could you please be a little more specific? I know I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but couldn't you, if imprinted on somebody's minds that the bridge was in a disaster? As it was, John Keel was in contact with several individuals that he called silent contactees. Now, these were people that believed they were in contact with some other intelligence. I think a lot of this was probably sort of channeling, although many of them said that they were actually having one-on-one contacts with these beings or whatever. But they firmly believed in this intelligence giving them predictions and information, and they had no desire to write a book or go public, and that's why Keel called them silent contactees. Well, over time, some of the predictions came true, and some did not. Now, over time, some of this stuff kind of coalesced. They said there's going to be an EM effect, and there's going to be 3 days of darkness or whatever. They one time they said the Pope, when he landed in the Middle East, he was going to be knifed, and Keel, a lot of these predictions were coming true, and Keel bought a lot of this. So he went out to a place on Long Island to hunker down called Mount Misery. I'm not sure why he went there or not, with a bunch of Mount Misery had a weird contact with UFOs and cryptid reports here on Long Island. And so on the way out, he stops to see one of the many dozens of contactees he'd been in contact with. And the contactee told him, he said, John, I just got a message from, I don't know who it was supposed to be. He said, tell John to wait for us and we'll help him drink all that water. So he was being messed with. Then when he was going to come back, he stopped at a motel at random. There were a bunch of messages there for him when he just had chose at the last minute, and they were all nonsensical. So a lot of bizarre stuff was going on. Keel used the term ultra-terrestrial because he kind of wanted to get away from ET. At this time period, he rejected the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Although later on, if you read an interview by the guy that Richard Toronto, that wrote all the great books on Richard Shaver and the Darrow and all that, He kind of backtracked a little bit, but he thought whatever was going on was probably a natural condition of the planet, and we didn't necessarily have to look off-world to find the answers. But so let me just see if I had to jot down a couple things here. You know, the Men in Black phenomena, which is another can of worms. I should mention that Linda Sigmund, who she had that experience in that missing time in April of '67. In early December of '67, now December that's the month when the bridge collapsed. Early on, she went over to Point Pleasant, and she went to go in a store, and there's a man standing there. This is NITE, a black suit, black fedora, dark sunglasses. She's wondering, what's this guy doing wearing sunglasses at night? And she walked by him and had kind of an odd pallor to his skin. And when she came out, she saw there's another one down the street leaning up against a light pole. And she thought, this is odd. But a lot of people saw these characters, or I mean, some of them I'm sure were just, Keel at one time saw a bunch of people, strangers in town. He talked to Mary Heyer, the reporter colleague that wrote Where the Waters Mingle, and she covered UFOs and Mothman and Men in Black. He said, Mary, is there a convention in town? I mean, these guys were obviously not, if there is such a thing as paranormal Men in Black, these guys were not. They were, had black suits, skinny ties, close cropped hair, and no personality, which meant they were probably from the government. But anyway, Linda was just really taken aback by these oddballs, but they just always brushed them off as government. Well, it was years later when she read Keel's book, she put two and two together and thought, wow, whatever these guys were seemed to be classic Men in Black. So, and one other side note, whatever this was didn't look anything like a moth. The Mothman statue is very stylized, and they sell all kinds of T-shirts. You can't have the same image of Mothman on a T-shirt. You got to have all kinds of interpretations, or you're only going to sell one T-shirt to one person, right? So it was. They believe it was just some kind of a creative copy editor that dubbed him Mothman. The Batman TV show with Adam West was popular at the time. It was probably just a play on Batman.
So it could as easily have been called the Owl Man.
Sure, but then that would they'd have to pay residuals to Cornwall, right?
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I was just thinking that kind of segues into John's scene down
right
there, doesn't it?
I read his book many years ago, and if I had a sharp memory, I could quote parts of it, but I don't have a good memory. It was a great book, though, as I remember.
It is lovely.
I don't remember what I wrote in it, because my memory is even worse.
That lets me off the hook, then.
Hang on, we've got an important member of the studio audience is trying to jump up on my lap.
Oh, it's Archie, is it?
Oh, he's now run away.
Steve.
Yes.
You were there in, when was it, 66, when it all kind of took off,
No, I was actually in Michigan.
Oh,
I
right.
was just in junior high school, but a few months before that, we had that great wave of UFOs in March of 1966. Ann Arbor, Dexter, Hillsdale, and I didn't have a driver's license, so I couldn't play UFO investigator. So I had to watch the news, and I saw, they sent the Project Blue Book, begrudgingly sent out Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And of course, Hynek was an astronomer from Northwestern University. He became part of Project Blue Book, which is supposed to be the Air Force's investigative unit on UFOs when it was just more of a public relations, and I think they were just annoyed by it. But Hynek, who had been a skeptic at first, became to believe there really was something to this and people should be listened to and so forth. But
was that after the point where he realized that he was being used as a stooge to just help cover things up?
Well,
or after that?
I think that's how he felt, because he He thought when he talked to the people in especially Frank Manor on the Frank Manor farm in Dexter, there was some
Yeah.
kind of a landing there. He thought a lot of this was legitimate, and there were some women at a girls' college in Hillsdale that saw some strange lights in the woods. Well, he felt like the apron strings were still tied to the Air Force, so he
Yeah.
had to straddle the fence. So he suggested that some of the sightings might have been swamp gas, and of course the
Yes.
jokes have still reverberated through the decades about that. He regretted it, and I actually saw him speak 10 years later in Ann Arbor at the Weber Inn. MUFON had their symposium. It was 67. No, sorry, 76. Yeah, 70. I'm a bit dyslexic, I guess. And the name of his talk was Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. And it was, there was some humor involved, but it was a serious talk. He had started the Center for UFO Studies. He did show some of the old cartoons in the old days. There was this one really great one where the little green men are there with their blasters, and they've just landed with their saucers, and they've stopped a man on the sidewalk, and the caption is, "Take us to the one that called us swamp gas."
Nice one.
But he redeemed himself. And of course he became a great colleague with Jacques Vallée, and that was a great relationship. And another great mind in this field, Jacques Vallée.
Yes. Very great.
Do you think there was a connection between the Mothman sightings, two, all the UFO sightings, and three, the destruction of the bridge?
I'm having a little trouble with your connection. You're asking if there were more than one?
No, do you
No.
think there was a connection between the destruction of the bridge and the UFO
Oh,
sightings and the Mothman?
I personally don't. I think all these things just happened at the same time. There are people that firmly believe that whatever it was caused the bridge disaster. There are many that firmly believe it's some kind of a harbinger, but I don't. There were rumors about seeing it over the bridge at the time. I'm just always, there was even a bridge collapse on the same highway, Route 35, in what was it, Minnesota, some years ago. And then after the fact, people said, well, they saw this winged apparition, this creature. So I just, it's possible, but I'm just always a little skeptical about that. So, and I don't, I'm not dogmatic about it. I mean, I could be wrong. It might, who knows what the actual connection was. But one thing I don't believe is, Chief Cornstalk was a Shawnee warrior. And he was around the time of the revolution and so forth. He was, people blame him. He was betrayed and murdered. And people think that he uttered a curse and that cursed the land and all that stuff. I don't think we can blame Native Americans for all the high strangest spots on the planet uttering curses. So they even found when they were tearing down an old schoolhouse, they found an old play that was written about in the 1920s, maybe, that dramatized the murder of Chief Cornstalk, and that's where they think the myth about the curse came from. So, but there's it's one of those things that you were mentioning earlier about all the bizarre stuff that was going on at the same time. I mean, people were seeing apparitions. Linda Scarberry saw sort of Men in Black type apparitions show up in her room. There was a Lilly family that lived on Camp Conley Road. Camp Conley runs east off of Route 62, and that's kind of the southern end of the TNT area. Well, they were having strange lights go over all the time, and they knew when their TVs were acting up, they knew something was outside. Well, one of the young girls saw one of the questions John Keel would ask is, have you ever had a dream of somebody being in your house? And just to get people to talk about, bedroom invaders, that kind of thing. And so this young girl saw something like a Man in Black, but more like an apparition in the house. Here's another weird thing for you. and I only caught this in a more recent reading of the Mothman prophecies, when he was out by the Old North Power Plant. And by the way, I went down there in 1977 after I read John Keel's book when the power plant was still standing, and I got some great black and white photographs of it, which I haven't been able to find for 20 years. But when Keel was out there, there was a couple spots where he found some odd looking footprints he thought might be attributed to Mothman, suggesting that it just at times he was paraphysical. But he also found these large dog-like footprints, which seemed to be pressed in. It had to be, he thought, something weighing a few hundred pounds. And, you know, we've all heard the stories in more recent times of the dog man, the Michigan dog man, the Wisconsin dog man, and it's all over the world. And Linda Godfrey was the one in the 90s that kind of brought it to consciousness when she wrote The Beast of Bray Road. So, but Keel found these footprints there. He also found them at another area where a man named Tad Jones saw a really bizarre, like a retro UFO. It was a sphere. It had legs on it. It had kind of like caster wheels on the bottom and a little propeller on the bottom, like some kind of an ancient drone or something. I don't know what it was. Wow. But he found those footprints out there. And he consulted with Ivan Sanderson. And Ivan said, yeah, for some reason, we keep finding these large dog-like footprints in these paranormal hotspots. But I hadn't heard any sightings of these upright canids like the dog man seemed to be. So I asked Linda Godfrey about it. She said, yeah, what's happened. So there was a guy I heard at a Michigan MUFON meeting who he was a retired Wayne State University professor. He was investigating Bigfoot and UFOs in Michigan. And he said we're finding the same place. So I don't know what to make of it. You have 4 researchers separated by half a century, all telling us that these large dog-like footprints show up in paranormal hotspots, and people aren't necessarily giving reports of the entity itself.
So, Steve, have you heard about any correlations between the UFO stuff and sightings of the Rougarou, werewolf, dogman sort of thing?
I think you find that there's higher activity in some of these areas. I don't know that you can directly connect them. Of course, during that time around Point Pleasant, John Keel and Mary Heyer and others, they resisted going to the TNT area because people were lined up in long, miles long to get in there. And some of these good old boys wanted to bag a Mothman, so they had their shotguns and their bow and arrows. Good luck with that. But what they did is they went several miles south down to a place called Gallipolis Ferry, and it can be, there's a lot of people that live down that way now, but imagine what it was like more than half a century ago. And, just some pretty desolate hollers out there. So they found a particular spot that he talks about in the book. He's kind of vague about where it is. Keel did that because he knew that people like us would be going up there to do our investigations, right? But he found a hill. There was a farmhouse that the farmer or whatever their lights would go off at 9 because obviously they're getting up early to do their work, and they would park there quietly, and they see all kinds of bizarre lights and strange lights going over. This place was just filled with it. So while there was only maybe a few instances where you could connect Mothman and the lights in the same place, these things were going over all the time. One thing about the so-called dogmen, Linda Godfrey had found several clusters of these sightings in a portion of southern Wisconsin. One day she was looking through a book that talked about, that covered various effigy mounds. There's a lot of great places you can go along the Mississippi River on both sides to see these things. She noticed that in this one particular area of southern Wisconsin, the effigy mounds and the dogman sightings, there was virtually no error in some of these areas. And I guess there's some kind of a Native American tradition that these creatures were sort of there protect the mounds. I don't know much about
Yeah.
that.
Do you know? We've got exactly the same tradition with our ancient Britons.
Right.
That's
What,
weird, isn't it? We've both got exactly the same tradition with exactly the same.
well, Paul Sinclair, he was
Yeah.
on my show. I do have a podcast called The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK Radio Network
Yeah.
with Andy Mercer and Susie Bastille. And yes, and I've seen Paul's documentary. So yeah, these patterns exist all over the world and seem to exist through time.
Yeah.
We've just had a comment from Robert Fulton in the audience saying that this is the aliens using Earth as a zoo.
Boy, I don't know. I think they could find a higher quality zoo if they were to go somewhere else. So I don't know. I'm not, when you I don't know if you're familiar with Albert Rosales. He has this amazing database of humanoid reports, and his books go from 01 AD to 2015. When you read through those, some of them seem very sort of Keelian, something that John Keel and Jacques Vallée might talk about. But there are others that seem to be very kind of physical and nuts and bolts. So, and I don't know how to separate them. It's bad. I was back in the old days. I was an ET guy, and then after that, I swung all the way and said, nope, there's nothing physical to this. These are just psychic manifestations, and people did not want to hear me rattle on about that. And you should have seen me at that Michigan symposium. It's a symposium in Ann Arbor. I was preaching from the Church of John Keel, and these guys were all ET guys. They wanted nothing to do with me.
Oh dear, I know the feeling because I was very close to the late Tony Shields, known as Doc Shields, who was the Irish wizard, mystic, drunk, painter, playwright, and all sorts of other things, who was totally sort of interwoven with the Cornish Owlman stories.
Oh, okay.
And as soon as people found out that I was a friend of his, it's immediate. I was tarred with the same brush. And
Well, it's over the years, it's become more acceptable to delve into the paranormal or high strangeness aspects. Back in the old days, it wasn't. It was very taboo, and the people didn't want to. I was at that Michigan MUFON symposium, and some people were kind of open to it, but others weren't. And a lot of good people there, a lot of good researchers, but yeah, they just had no patience for anything other than the strict ET.
There is a theory, isn't there, that the Mothman could have been some kind of mutant because of the chemicals which are kept in the TNT area. Well, what's your view on that?
Well, it was what do they call? I forget what they call that area now, but it has been a place they've been cleaning up for decades now. And I just think that if it was some kind of a mutation, when we see actual mutations like of a bird or something like that, it might have a deformed wing and it can't fly. I guess I don't see a sort of a perfect hybrid of a man-like creature and a bird-like creature merging together. And again, we have some of them said that some biologists, I guess, have said that the wingspan wasn't broad enough to lift something like this. I tend to shy away from that, but you see, also along with it came this all. If it was some kind of a mutant, why is all this other? Why does it create outbreaks of poltergeist phenomena? Why does it, if this one particular report is true, why does it sort of materialize and dematerialize? So there's a lot of problems with that, I think.
Some of the igloos are still there, aren't they?
Oh yeah, there's 100 of them there, and a couple friends of mine that are instrumental in and working at the Great Mothman Festival, I have to tell you about that. They actually went to every single one of those. Now, a lot of them aren't accessible now, but you can actually get directions from the Mothman Museum. Go 9 miles north on Route 62, and it'll tell you where to park, and you can actually get back in there. Now, we take people out to that general area for the TNT hayride. So let me. I got to tell you about the Mothman Festival. Every third weekend in September. I've been going since 2006. And as time has gone on, I have become absorbed. I used to be a happy-go-lucky guy that would just buy everything. I get the fever. I buy everything with Mothman on it, books, T-shirts, trinkets, whatever. But now I do one of the tours. I go in ahead of time and set up some creepy crawlies, giant spiders and so forth. We make it a kind of a Halloween hayride. But it's thousands of people show up. The main street is filled with food, T-shirts, all kinds of vendors. The perpendicular road, which is right on where the Mothman statue is, the speakers who speak on Saturday and Sunday, they all have their tables there. They're very accessible. A lot of big names there. People everybody recognizes like Nick Redfern and so forth. What you really want to do, the only thing that costs a little bit of money is the TNT hayride. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you go, get there early Saturday morning and stand in line for your ticket. Because we take people to the old farm museum, which is on kind of in the general area of the TNT area. In fact, the Old North power plant that used to stand there was right across the street. So we line up. We have 3 tractors, 3 carts. 2 of them are like proper hay rides with bales of hay. They give me the old man cart with a nice, comfortable seats, which I appreciate. And we take people into the dreaded TNT area. The men in black are there with bullhorns trying to turn you away, telling you that it's a restricted area, but they're a lot more like the Keystone Cops and the men in black. And you go in. It's a creepy area anyway, but I set up a few cobbled together creatures and so forth. And my buddies, there's a Mothman hanging in the ceiling of the Mothman Museum. They take him down. They go out ahead of time, and they set him up. They hide behind the old acid plant, and they run this Mothman figure down a wire. They have this ingenious low-tech hand crank delivery system. They light up his eyes with battery power, and they blast a sound effect from I can't tell you where, because they don't pay royalties, and they might be incarcerated. So I won't tell you about that. But he has this great screech, and you'll guaranteed flyer over the Mothman coming down the wire. So it's, like I say, it's a little bit like a Halloween hayride, but it's creepy enough you really don't even need any of that. And it is an absolute blast. Interacting with the people on the cart and so forth. It's just so much fun.
John, John, we should have an Owlman festival, shouldn't we? Every year.
I like your thinking.
Yeah, isn't it?
David.
Yes.
Well, you've been sitting there looking very. What's the word?
I'm just listening.
Pensive is probably the word.
Very what?
Pensive. You've been looking.
No, I was listening to Steve because I've been to the TNT area and that, and I'm just finding it really interesting, all the new information. So I'm just kind of absorbing things in. Now, Steve, I have a question for you. When did Linda pass away?
I'd have to look it up. It's been 5 or 7 years, maybe. I not good with years. When I talked to her several times, Jeff would have her. Jeff Walmsley was her paper boy. They lived on the same street, and along with Roger Scarborough. I used to see Roger out there working on his Chevy. But I'm sorry, I just can't tell you what year. But she was a great lady. I met her in 2006 the first time, and she always stood by her story, and just a very, very nice lady, very classy lady, and it was great to have a chance to talk to her. I've also talked to a woman named Faye DeWitt, who is not, but she went out there a lot of people went out there because they thought it was a joke. And when they got out there, they had a nice surprise. Her brother drove out there with she and her other siblings. One of her brothers just stayed down below the window, and they went out to the old North Power Plant. She said they saw this thing. She said she didn't seem like it actually flew. It kind of jumped up on top of the power plant. At one point, it jumped up on the hood of the car, and it looked through the window. And you may have seen her interviews before, because with her accent, she says it had the biggest, reddest eyes you ever did see. And so, yeah, she's another great lady. She would come to the festivals. Another man, Tom Urey, he's also passed. I talked to him several times. He's the one that was misquoted in the Mothman prophecies. He actually saw something like a thunderbird, and the prophecies makes it sound more like Connie Carpenter's sighting. Now, I don't know if that's now. I do know that he was friends with Mary Hyre, the reporter. She got something wrong about his sighting, and I wish I could tell you exactly what it was. But Tom told me, he said he was really ticked off because I think she associated it more with the Mothman sightings at the time, which he thought might be separate. And he walked into her office one day. He told me this about 40 years after the event, and he said, "Mary," and he was kidding. He said, "Mary, I ought to kill you." And she said, "Tom, don't worry about it. This will all blow over in about 2 weeks." Well, here it is, 2 days later, and it hasn't blown over.
Famous last words.
And he was ticked off that he got his report wrong. He approached John Keel and Gray Barker, and so he was always waving the flag to correct the report. And also, he thought originally that the others saw the same thing he did. This is what he told me. But they, due to the freak out factor, they added the details. Well, when they were making the film, The Mothman Prophecies, 2002, thereabouts, he was driving to Katanning, Pennsylvania, where they actually filmed, did some substitutions for Point Pleasant. And he was sitting next to Marcella Bennett. Now, Marcella Bennett, I never had a chance to talk to. She's also not with us anymore. She's the one that went out to the TNT area. They went out to visit some friends. There were houses out there in some places. And they were going to just tap on the window, she and her brother, to scare her friends before this big joke about the Mothman. Well, her brother's trying to get some attention, get her attention, because he's seeing some kind of a strange light up in the sky. I forgot about this possible connection with the Mothman, and she didn't want to, even see it. And then this thing, whatever it was, rose up off the ground, and she was stunned. She fell. She dropped her infant child. The child was okay, and her legs wouldn't work. They tried to get back to the house. She finally got up. She and her brother and the child got inside. And this thing they said was walking back and forth across the porch. So anyway, that's another aside. So she's riding out there with Tom Urey. And Tom says, "Okay, let's tell each other our stories." Because, I was actually there with Tom Urey one time with Linda Scarberry and Faye DeWitt. And you think everybody knows everybody, right? Well, that's the first time he had actually met them. So he told, his story, and he heard her story about the Mothman. He decided that they had seen something different. He changed his mind that they had seen the same thing and had kind of imprinted something on it that wasn't there.
Yeah, I met Linda when we were there.
Oh, Linda
Scarberry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was very cool. We had my daughter Carol with me, and Carol was about 12, so Linda made a point to come over and say hello to her and that. So it was really kind of nice because they knew we were there for the Mothman experience.
Right.
We stayed at the hotel in the corner that's supposed to be haunted.
Right, the Low Hotel. It has been. They closed it down some months ago for fire violations.
Oh, no.
But fortunately, somebody has purchased it, and there are plans to renovate it and get it. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it would be great to have a motel. You see, everybody has to go across the river to Gallipolis to get a motel, or sometimes drive an hour or 2 hours away because this thing has become so. I'm not bragging, but now I just live up the street. I actually live on the same road that the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased on November 15th, 1966. And when I close my podcast, I never let people forget that. So now I don't see anything except a bunch of young guys racing their cars up and down that street, but I haven't seen any cryptids yet.
Okay. Well, keep your eyes open.
I do all the time.
Yeah, I know. We went out to the igloos and we did a lot of photography inside of them. And I spent probably a week after I came home blowing up all these pictures, looking in the orb, the dust orbs.
Oh, yeah.
Looking for the faces, because I think it was Rick that told me to do that. When we were at the museum, he said, yeah, if you go out there, you look at the orbs, some people say you see faces and that. So.
Well, there was one guy who's, again, no longer with us, Bob. He ran a gift shop on the corner right across from the Mothman Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And he would take people out there, Bob Landers, I think. He would take people out there at night with no flashlights and take them on tours. But somebody out there got a photograph of an orb, and he slowly blew it up. And I know that, the mind can play tricks. But when you look at this at certain stages, it honestly looks like a Native American with the cheekbones and so forth. It may be nothing, but it's creepy as hell. Yeah, I know people that have seen what they call shadow people out there.
Mm-hmm.
Even I had a bizarre experience one time, and nothing ever happens to me. The Reader's Digest version is I went out there alone one night just to test my mettle, see if I could brag to the ladies that I went out to the TNT area at night and survived. I mean, a lot of locals go out there and camp and hunt and so forth. But so I was driving back along Route 62. I experienced a couple flashes of light, like a strobe and then a strobe. I thought, that's weird. I didn't have the presence of mind to think, where was this in the road where I could check it the next day? I drove across the river to my motel. I opened up the door to my motel room. The TV set turned on by itself and started flipping through stations. And my first thought was, no, this doesn't happen to me. This happens to other people, and they tell me about it. And so I did what any intrepid paranormal investigator would do. I unplugged the TV and went to bed. I looked at the clock, and at first I thought, no missing time. And then as I think back, I thought, well, I'm not sure. And I thought, why didn't I have the presence of mind to write everything down, document everything? But I didn't. Very quickly, a year later, I'm in the room next to that room, crammed in with a couple of my buddies. We're very cheap, trying to save money. And we have another one of these old style TVs. The night we're in there, it turns on by itself. Nothing happens. The next day, a couple of us come back to the room. It turns on by itself and then goes through a couple stations. So we tried to get scientific, zap the controller through the wall or whatever. Nothing. A few years later, in the next room over, which is a corner room, much bigger, there are two couples we knew were in there. And they have one of the smart TVs. And so they're having trouble with the volume. The volume keeps getting lower. They keep cranking it up. And then it blasts at them. And then they do it all over again. And then all of a sudden, there's a can, a beverage of some kind that was on the nightstand, flew off the nightstand and hit the floor. So if I brought something back from the TNT area, fortunately, he's still there flipping channels and everything's going with me.
Just trying to find something to watch.
That's it. That's my entire paranormal experience.
Do people still report seeing?
Yes, you don't hear about them too often. Jeff gets them because people do go into the museum, and he has gotten in his books. He chronicles a few of them. People through the various decades occasionally see something. Now, if John Keel is onto something, if these are, and I love this word, transmogrifications of energy, perhaps they don't always take the same shape. Maybe it's coming from the same source. Can we say it is the Mothman? I don't know. And I'm very, I kind of get on people a little bit when, people have seen winged creature sightings all over the world. Owlman, the Houston Batman, which looked like some guy in a suit of the 50s. The Wisconsin man bat, some big ugly bat that hit a man and his son's windshield brushed against it and they got ill afterwards. We hear stories of bat squatch. I mean, if you want something that's biologically untenable, how does a pair of wings, how large would the wings have to be to pick up a Sasquatch? I don't know. I think, who was it? The Reverend Donald Omond that went with Ted Holliday to exorcise Nessie. He called it the Phantom Menagerie, and I kind of like that. Although it doesn't, Keel even way back in Strange Creatures from Time and Space, he talked about type A cryptids and type B. He thought some of them were certainly paranormal or paraphysical, but he even said that back in those days, he thought that maybe some of the water monsters were actually unknown, just cryptids, and maybe the Yeti and so forth. Although I suspect he thought there was something a little bit off about Nessie because he corresponded at length with Ted Holliday. And I've always been fascinated by Ted Holliday's, the Great Orm of Loch Ness, the Dragon in the Disc, and the God of the Universe. A great, and I even way back in 1973, I stayed in a youth hostel in Inverness. And I got to see, Stonehenge and some of the really great spots. But I got down to Loch Ness on a nice clear day. And at that point, I had just read The Great Orm of Loch Ness. And I hadn't read the paranormal stuff. And he talked about some of the land sightings. So while I had my eye keenly on the waters, hoping Nessie would show, I was also looking over my shoulder just in case this thing just came bouncing off the road into the lake. And I had no luck.
Oh,
I know.
Well, you mentioned the bat squatch thing. On the parts of America, I think Missouri is one of them. Parts of America with legends of winged monkeys. And isn't that where that came from in the Wizard of Oz? I think
right. I hadn't heard about those.
Have you not heard about those?
No. Listen, those guys were cool. I love the winged monkeys.
Yeah.
Go fly, my pretties.
Steve, what about the theory that people are mistaking the sun for the Mothman?
The what for the Mothman?
The sandhill crane, just the regular the crane. Yeah,
that's one of these explanations that people that have no patience for trying to discover the truth. The sandhill crane or a big owl.
McGahey bloke. That's the sort of thing he says, isn't it?
Now, I have no doubt that when nerves were high and people were out there in the shadows and maybe tanked up a little bit, if they saw a shadow or a sandhill crane or even maybe one of their friends, they could have mistaken anything for the Mothman. So I have no doubt that some of these sightings were probably of something very normal. Let me tell you one story. There was this great lady named Vi that had a beauty parlor in downtown Point Pleasant. We went down there one time during the festival. My buddy knew her. She's telling us all kinds of great stories about those days of the Mothman. She said there was a lover's lane. I don't know where it was, but a couple guys sneaked up there in their car. They both had shotguns and two big feather pillows. So they threw the pillows up in the air, blasted them, and yelled, "Mothman!" And she claims that everybody cleared out of there in about a minute. So I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it's a good story.
It's a good story, yeah.
I must admit, I'd be tempted to do exactly the same thing.
And what do you think of the Jersey Devil, the horse with wings, basically wings too small to?
Well, I don't think much of the original story that the 13th child and that curse and all that nonsense. However, I think it was at Monster Quest. One of them did a piece on that where they put people under hypnosis and gave them lie detector tests, and it seemed like they saw something. It might just be something more out of the Phantom Menagerie. It's a little bit like a cousin of Mothman, a little bit like the cousin of the original Chupacabra, the one in Puerto Rico that seemed to be more supernatural or paraphysical or whatever. So I think there's probably something to that, but just if it's is it a unknown flesh and blood that has remained hidden? I don't know.
Because there's quite a famous drawing of it, isn't it? Which is basically a horse on its hind legs
Right.
with wings, which could no way carry such a being. But
Right. Well, get this. I was at a Mothman festival with the two guys, John and Tim, that fly the Mothman, and then Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who is no longer with us. She was a friend, a great researcher, wrote dozens and dozens of great books. We were there, and a lady approached us that lived near, not too far from Charleston, and she was talking about the bizarre stuff going on in her property. So we went there one day just to kind of do a preliminary interview with the family. Nothing ever came of it, but they were telling us all these bizarre things that were happening, and finishing each other's sentences. They were seeing shadow people, classic UFOs, mysterious singing down in the howler. She heard this voice when she was a little girl. Just bizarre stuff. But she had seen something that her description was very much like a Jersey devil on the property. Just saw it one time. So, what to make of that? These people did seem credible. And Rosemary had she kept them very quiet. There was some other 2 or 3 other hot spots along the Pennsylvania-West Virginia border where people were experiencing all kinds of bizarre phenomena in an isolated spot. Things that again, like Mothman, it had a winged creature, UFOs, poltergeist phenomena, men in black, stuff that you may not connect necessarily, but all seem to be happening at the same time in the same place.
Yeah, and what do you reckon on the Flatwoods monster, which is a brilliant story? I think no matter what you think of it, the tale of the young boys and their mother going up there to investigate. What do you think of that?
Well, I just went with Dusty Morrison. Dusty is Jeff Wamsley's son-in-law who loves this stuff. We drove out to the Flatwoods Monster Museum a few weeks back to celebrate Gray Barker's 100th birthday. It was great. They had a birthday cake for him. We went out to, there's a isolated place where the Barkers are buried. But the original, is so bizarre and so unique. One weird thing about it is Nick Redfern in Monster Files wrote about, I can't remember the guy's name. He was a famous magician that was the World War II. They used him to create subterfuge, to create illusions and so forth, to try and help win the war. And supposedly he created something in the hills of Italy, and the description looks a lot like a Flatwoods monster. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? But if it was some kind of a creation, I don't know how they pulled something like that. The government pulled something off like that in the early 50s. I mean, there were, if you read the literature, there were many strange lights, UFOs, that were going over the U.S. at that time. So this wasn't just a thing. And, it's so classic. I mean, this guy's out by the well, and this thing hits, behind the hill. And, I'm saying, did you see any monster movies? You get the hell out of there. You don't. It sounds so bad.
They took the dog with them as well. It was great. I'm not mainly a UFO guy, but I love that story. Anyway.
Did you ever see Invaders from Mars?
I have seen that, yeah.
I was so disappointed at the end when you think it's a dream and then it's not a dream. Man, I was spitting mad. And then I went to something called a Monster Bash, which is like one of these big conventions where you meet all kinds of celebrities. I met Jimmy Hunt, the guy that played the little kid at the time.
Yeah.
He told me that in Britain they wouldn't allow that ending. They had to do a different ending to make a happy ending. So I appreciate the British people for that more than anything, because I finally got that DVD and I finally had closure that the aliens were vanquished.
Nice.
Which seems an appropriate time to say, boys and girls, we only have 11 minutes left.
Good God.
Yeah, we've gone through an hour and 20. We've gone through an hour and 29 minutes. No, an hour and 22 minutes already without breaking a sweat.
Very good.
Which
Now,
is
I get
totally
overtime for that
amazing.
20 minutes, right? Just kidding.
I think you've done. I think this has been absolutely fascinating.
Oh, it's been, I've really enjoyed this. This is so much fun. It's great talking to people that are this knowledgeable about this subject.
We'll have to have you back on, Steve.
Listen, anytime.
That's
Yeah,
exactly what I
wanted,
was.
I wanted to say something about 10 minutes ago, but I couldn't. I didn't have the heart to stop you, Steve, because you were really in full flow and it was really interesting. But have you ever seen the pictures that people that have seen Mothman, the Jersey Devil, have drawn of it? And have you ever noticed a similarity between that and the hammerhead bat?
Oh, I haven't. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, look it up. Just pictures on Google, just hammerhead bat, and then remember those pictures that you've previously seen with the weird thing that's got an almost camel-like mouth on it.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know those images that you see, and it looks like a sort of camel head. Well, look at the hammerhead bat. It's got a very, very similar head, and I've been thinking for some time. Perhaps it's possible that there are some hammerhead bats in the Pine Barrens.
Oh, there may well be. I mean, there's no question that people are actually seeing something that is, in quotes, normal or natural, but maybe seeing them under unusual circumstances, or they're just not. I mean, I'm not aware of certainly every creature in the animal kingdom, and I'm sure I would come across some creatures that are a bit strange, but gentlemen,
if you've got a local mythology that makes you think, oh, we might see a monster here, and then you see something like a hammerhead bat with the same sort of shaped head, in the excitement, in the fear of the moment, you could be forgiven for well overestimating its size. It's a huge bat anyway,
Right. Well,
what about, though, to finish would be a good thing. What about the film with Richard Gere? What's your take on that?
When I first saw it, I was a little disappointed. I wanted more of the book. I wanted more of the Men in Black. But shortly after, I thought, well, you know what? They had that silly Man in Black movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. And, if people would have made the connection with that and just laughed at it. Well, strangely enough, I'm glad you brought that up because Brent Raines, who's a man that never met John, but he talked to him on the phone a lot. They corresponded. Brent has been has an interest in this as long as I have, except that he's created a great magazine over the years, Alternate Perceptions magazine, which you can still get online. And he talked to Sandra Martin. She was John Keel's literary agent in later years. And she said she was talking to him on the phone one time and he was laughing. He was so happy. He said he finally read a screenplay that actually captured some of the essence of his book. And he said, look, they've updated it. They've got me married and they've changed things. They told their own story. But it was, oh gosh, don't fail me, brain. The gentleman that wrote the screenplay, it'll come to me. But he was just so happy that Richard Hatem wrote a screenplay that he said they finally got some of the basic ideas of my book. And I was able to meet Richard Hatem 2 years ago at a Small Town Monsters conference. And I was able to tell him this. He did not know that John Keel was so happy about his screenplay. He had met John and got along with him well, but and then I had him on my podcast. And so it was just great to impart that information to Richard Hatem that John was so pleased, because I think prior to that, people had been writing screenplays that turned Mothman into a monster, probably.
Yeah. So. Which when I saw it in the cinema, I've only seen it once. I did see it when it came out. And at the time I was a bit disappointed because I did want to see a monster. That's what I turned up for. Yeah. I wanted the money shot. and it wasn't there. But as time has gone on, I think I should see it again, and I will
Yes.
appreciate. If I see it now, I think I would appreciate it a
Now
lot
it's
more.
it's one of my favorite films of all time,
Yeah,
and that I have a deeper view of it.
yeah,
And they really, there's some great there were some scenes in there where they did capture some elements of the book, and
yeah.
oh, listen, I'm a film score soundtrack fanatic, and Tom and Andy did the score, and it is phenomenal, very atmospheric, and worked very well.
Was John Keel still alive at that time then? 2000?
Yes.
He was, yeah.
In fact, he was on with Coast to Coast AM when Art Bell had it. I don't know if you guys listened to it over there or not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Very good.
I've got a whole collection.
Oh yeah. Those are great days. And he was in 2002. He hadn't done many interviews, but he gave an interview to Art Bell. Art Bell didn't know anything about the Mothman. I mean, John Keel was being forgotten. The Mothman Prophecies was in print, but so much of his other stuff was gone, was lost. And I thought, I'm still going to the Church of John Keel, every Sunday. Yeah. So come on. And he asked. This is before I knew anything about Richard Haddam. He asked John if he liked the movie. He said yes, I liked it very well. And he said the thing it really captured was the paranoia I felt at the time. And if you remember chapter 16 of the Mothman Prophecies, paranoiacs are made, not born. And he was really at the last minute when they said that EM effect was going to happen on December 15th, 1967. And they said when President Johnson lit the Christmas tree, there was going to be 3 days of darkness and there was going to be a disaster on the Ohio River, but it was vague. And he was there in his apartment and nothing happened. And then a few moments later, a news bulletin came over the radio saying the bridge collapsed at Gallipolis, Ohio. Well, the bridge didn't go to Gallipolis. It came from Point Pleasant over to Kanawha. And so he was furious. Whatever this intelligence was, knew something was going to happen, something terrible, but they were misdirected. That's when you get into that realm of channeling and the Space Brothers and all that, boy, beware. Because they'll lead you along for a while and give you great predictions, and then all of a sudden they'll pull the rug out.
Yeah, I don't get why so many people seem to think that these things are angels when almost everything they communicate to people is a lie.
Well, are you familiar with Brad Steiger's Revelation, the Divine Fire? A great book. He talks about how the same kinds of messages come to people from what they think is God, angels, channeling, mediums, and so forth. But they're kind of the same, oftentimes the same message, the same warnings, the same dire predictions. And John Keel, Brad Steiger said, had uncovered many books from around the 1920s and so forth, mostly privately published, about people that had other sort of revelations, but it's the same thing. And that's what he called the great phonograph in the sky. Whatever it is keeps repeating the same message over and over again. And I'm sure there's somebody out there right now in some part of the world getting the message, and they think they're the first ones, and they need to tell the world about it. So just be very cautious, ladies and gentlemen, if you're dabbling in any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, with those sage words from Steve.
Yes, I second that emotion.
Brings us to the end far too soon. So, Steve, I second what Ian said earlier. Come back on in a couple of months' time. We'll do this again because
absolutely
we've only just scratched the surface.
You guys must descend upon Point Pleasant and the Ohio Valley, and I want you to come to the festival, and I want you to be on my ride when I take people through the dreaded TNT area.
Do you do the old man ride?
I do one of the. There's three of us. Jeff Wamsley, the creator, a great young lady named Brittany Sayre, whose grandfather was a National Guardsman and saw the Mothman, and then me. So there's three of us. The only three guides and the only Mothman hayride and the only Mothman festival. So there you go.
Yeah, we need the comfy seats.
That'd be great. Great to have you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. On Saturday, we've got the second part on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. We've got the second part of my interview with Chester Moore Jr. about his work when he rediscovered the red wolf in Texas.
Yeah,
And then the
fascinating
more,
guy.
sorry?
Fascinating guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Very, very.
fascinating.
One of the nicest as well. Really nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hopefully will see you all then. And this is about it.
Thank you all.
Please get better soon, Viv. A big all our love, all our
Yes.
healing vibes go out to you. It's not the same without you. So, Viv,
Yeah.
this is for you because you're the one who does that. Bye bye, everybody. God bless
Yeah.
you all.
Big hugs, Viv.
Time to go home, time to go home from your simply spooky adrenaline ride. Time to go home, time to go home, even if you're terrified. Goodbye. Time to go home, time to go home. Vivian and her weird friends are all going home. Time to go home, time to go home. Vivian is waving goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.